You are looking at the Excel Center where the Huskies will play their first game in downtown Hartford this season. UConn getting ready to host Cornell. Tip-off is at the top of the hour, and we are getting you ready for all of the action. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the UConn Men's pregame show. I'm Justine Ward, joined by Vin Parisi and Tariq Turner. The Huskies coming off back-to-back games here in New York City, and tonight they return home to Connecticut. It was a split series at the Garden for UConn as they defeated the 15th-ranked Syracuse Orange last Thursday before losing to Iowa on Friday in the finals of the 2K Empire Classic. Vin, your biggest takeaway from those two games at the Garden?
Well, you know, to kick off the Dan Hurley era, Justine, here we talked about the grit and everything that he wanted to do to put his fingerprints on this basketball team. You saw that, especially defensively against Syracuse, the way they got after people with that vaunted man-to-man defense, and you started to see this team take on Dan Hurley's personality. I think that's what fans are going to remember from MSG.
And the pace they played was exactly how Danny Hurley wanted to play. Up-tempo, fast-paced, but not frenetic. They had some turnovers, but they were aggressive turnovers. They pushed the tempo out. Tariq Gilbert really was the catalyst, got Jalen Adams going. I thought Terrence Smith was great off the bench. And that four-guard combo is going to be the real core of their team, and they showed why they're going to be so exciting this year.
What did you make of the three-point shooting in both of those games, and how big is that for this team moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, you could see that it comes in waves, but you could also see how many capable guards Dan Hurley has to knock down the three-pointers. And listen, when you're playing against the best 2-3 zone in the country, you're going to have to make shots from the perimeter. Dan Hurley knew this coming in, and this has been a trademark staple. Developing guards on the perimeter has always been what Dan Hurley's been known for.
You're absolutely right. And another reason they were successful from three is they had some balance with their interior play. Eric Cobb came up huge, and they weren't just skipping the ball around the perimeter. They got some paint touches, got the ball into the middle of that zone, attacked the gaps, and Eric Cobb being an anchor down low, a double-double the last two games, gives them more options from the perimeter to knock down those threes.
All right, we know it'll be very important tonight. Let's welcome in our very own Maria Marino, who joins us live from the Excel Center. And Maria, you were at MSG for both of those games. What was the feeling like around the team?
Well, Justine, talk about an extreme case of high and low, okay? You had the world's most famous arena. You had a ranked opponent at the time in Syracuse, and Syracuse also happens to be another storied program and one in which UConn has this historic rivalry with. So for UConn, who is rebuilding, to come out, play hard, play so well, and get a victory, that was huge for them. And of course, the team was in a celebratory mood. Coach Hurley said today, when I spoke to him at shoot-around, that they were sort of basking in it. That was the term that he used. But unfortunately, there was the challenge of the quick turnaround. And Coach Hurley said that he was disappointed. He didn't adequately prepare his team for that. So they did get the loss the following day. It was a letdown, but it was a lesson as well.
And you did, as you said, you spoke with Coach Hurley. What were his takeaways from the two games as you look at the weekend as a whole in New York?
Well, the first thing was they had to experience adversity for the first time, which is what happened in that loss to Iowa. You know, how did they respond to being down on the scoreboard for the first time? Coach Hurley said the issue was their offense wasn't working, and when that happens, they need to make up for it. So they need to be grittier, they need to be tougher, and that shows up when it comes to the defense and the rebounding. However, Coach Hurley reiterated today when I spoke to him that if you would have asked him a while ago if they left New York 1-1, would he be okay with that? Yes, he would be. And I would just like to add that I think one positive was the emergence of Eric Cobb, especially because coming into this season, it was pretty much understood that the backcourt on this team had the strength and had the depth. It was the front court that's been unproven. So we'll see if that front court can continue to make a big impact tonight.
All right, Maria Marino from the Excel Center, thank you so much. And so we saw what UConn can be in the victory against Syracuse, but they are clearly still a work in progress. So, Vin, what area sticks out to you as needing improvement from this Huskies team?
Well, you know, hearing from Dan Hurley, I mean, it's a coach's nature to analyze the loss more than you analyze the win. But one theme that was consistent for those 2 days in New York City was the Huskies turning the basketball over. And they had 35 turnovers in the 2 games. And it was an issue for the guards at different times. And obviously you're playing against a zone the first night and then multiple defenses the second night. Now, personally, I think that there's multiple reasons for this. I mean, they're still early in the Dan Hurley era. They're still adjusting to a new philosophy. He's playing and shuffling a lot of different guards together. They played against 2 teams that are longer than most teams in the American Athletic Conference. But at the end of the day, you need to take care of the rock, especially this time of the year.
Well, you know, Danny Hurley's going to let them play and give them some freedom of creativity, but it has to be within the realm of taking care of the basketball and not getting out of hand. And that Iowa game, it got out of hand. They just turned the ball over. They coughed it up too much. A lot of those turnovers were live ball turnovers, which led to runouts, and Iowa was able to get out in transition. Look, they're going to learn. They're going to get better. I think they're going to have some games when they have high turnovers, but what you don't want to do is have constant mistakes, the same mistakes over and over, and that's one thing Danny Hurley's really stressed to them going into tonight's game.
Well, one joke that Danny made was, hey, listen, we'll start walking the ball up and play slow down basketball. Now, Tariq and I still don't believe him that he's going to do that.
I think it's a threat, but I think it's also some truth to it. I think he wants to make sure that his team respects the basketball and takes care of every possession out on the offensive end.
Well, turnover is definitely something we will be watching for tonight. All right, we're just getting going here tonight. Coach Dan Hurley has a great mentor on the campus in stores, Hall of Famer Gino Auriemma. We'll find out what the coach with 11 rings to his name has told the new guy in town.
One thing he stressed to me was obviously this is a much different animal in terms of the attention, in terms of the scrutiny, in terms of the expectations. I mean, this is, you know, the basketball capital of college basketball.
Welcome back as we shine a light on UConn's next 2 games presented by Connecticut Lighting Centers. We're about 20 minutes from UConn hosting Cornell. The Huskies will then host New Hampshire on Saturday afternoon, followed by UMass Lowell a week from today. Both of those games will be live on SNY. UConn then hosts the Arizona Wildcats in another tough test. That is senior Eric Cobb warming up on the court in Hartford. The front court was thought to be a weak spot for UConn this season, but Cobb has been stepping up. He is averaging over 14 points and 10 rebounds in his last 2 games. We'll have more on Cobb's strong showing at MSG in just a bit. Head coach Dan Hurley is just 4 games into his career at UConn, but he is already gaining praise for his emotion following the win against Syracuse. Now, there's another big name when it comes to Connecticut coaching, and to get to the level on campus of Hall of Famer Gino Auriemma, it will take more than regular season wins. Our Maria Marino sat down with Coach Hurley and asked what he has learned from Gino thus far.
Gino's a super cool guy, man. He obviously, you know, genius coach and a really smart guy, and you know, one of the all-time great college basketball coaches or basketball coaches of our generation. I've had a chance to learn a lot from him already. He's been incredibly welcoming. I think he was one of, when word hit that I accepted the job before a pre-press conference, heard both from Gino and his wife while he was playing in, I think, Elite 8 games, Sweet 16 games. So, you know, it tells you how unselfish and how welcoming, you know, he's been. Had a chance to watch practice, had a chance to do some, you know, some donor meet and greets and some, you know, some things to stir up interest in the tri-state area, you know, with him, and traveling over the course of a couple of days where I was able to just pick his brain about the place. And the one thing he stressed to me was obviously this is a much different animal in terms of the attention, in terms of the scrutiny, in terms of the expectations. I mean, this is, you know, the basketball capital of college basketball. So, but the thing that he's tried to get across to me is that don't change a whole lot about who you are. Don't change a whole lot about who you recruit. Recruit the same type of people. Just try to get a little bit more talented of a guy and maybe a little bit taller.
What do you think it is about him that allows him to establish a winning culture? And do you think you could, or would you want to emulate that in any way?
With Gino, he seems to be, obviously, most high achievers are never satisfied. So you could see, you know, a coach there that's always looking to learn. As accomplished as he is, I've run into him at coaching clinics. I've seen him at multiple Boston Celtics practices back when I was a coach at University of Rhode Island. So a guy that's done what he's done in the sport continues to be, a lifetime learner, and most highly successful people are. And then obviously, just watching the way that they play, getting over, watching practices. It's not like the same exact thing in terms of our coaching styles, but things that you're able to learn if you go over there, once every 10 days, 2 weeks, in terms of the drills, in terms of the teaching. There's just a lot to learn, just from even just the X and O part.
Some good tidbits from Gino Auriemma, no doubt. Culture is a big word in stores right now. Tariq, how has Coach Hurley showed that he's beginning to change that culture just through 4 games?
Well, you really first saw it, when I was at the Garden when they beat Syracuse last week, and the way the Garden responded to Danny Hurley's energy and the way he connected with his teammates, the chest bump at the end of the game with Jalen Adams, just the emotion, that really defines what your program is going to be like. And that culture starts by how the players respond to Danny Hurley's energy. And you could see that in that game. The crowd certainly responded to it. And you're going to get that every game, whether it's Cornell or Syracuse or Arizona. That is how he coaches, and you can see it. The players are buying into it, and they're feeding off of it.
Yeah, I thought the first success was a major overhaul in this 6-month offseason, and nobody transferred. That rarely happens with a major rebuilding situation. And then you look at, do the players buy in, and how is your program perceived? I mean, you could see that these kids have bought in. These kids play hard, extremely hard for Dan Hurley. And then when you see the crowd chanting during his technical fouls and ejections, which sounds like something silly, but it really shows you that the fan base loves this guy, and they're on board with it. And now the way recruiting's going off the floor for next year, they are on board with the Dan Hurley era.
And players can feed off that energy from the fans
Absolutely.
as well. But I have to ask you both,
yes,
what did you make of that slap when they won against Syracuse?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great because it's showing that he is really connecting with his players. Not only any player, his best player, Jalen Adams, gets the chest bump, gets the slap, and that's the emotion that players feed off of. And you can tell Jalen Adams, who's the leader of that team, is feeding off of Danny Hurley's energy, and that trickles down to the last guy on the team.
I think Tariq will agree because we encounter this a lot covering college basketball. There's usually one extreme or another. There's usually the hard-nosed coach who maybe the guys start to tune him out because he's always negative, and then there's the guy that's too nice and the players take advantage of. The fact that he's able to get after his guys that hard, yet they still want to come over and hug him like a teammate, that shows you a lot about player and coach relationships with this staff.
It's interesting. He's towing the line the right way right now. All right, so more to get to here on the UConn Men's pregame show. It's been a long road to recovery for Tariq Gilbert. We are going to examine what the former All-American is bringing to this year's squad. That's after the break. Still more to do.
Smith getting it to Gilbert, putting it on the deck, and great move right there by Tariq Gilbert. Gilbert pulling up from way downtown, attacking off the window.
No. Gilbert, look away. Oh my goodness. Tariq Gilbert buries it from way downtown.
Good rotation. Gilbert from the left corner.
There he is, Tariq Gilbert. After back-to-back years of season-ending shoulder surgeries, Gilbert has come back and gotten off to a strong start so far. The redshirt sophomore is shooting 45% from deep and averaging nearly 14 points per game. UConn's backcourt was clearly going to be the strongest part of the team this season, led by Jalen Adams. But the play of Gilbert so far has shown UConn fans what they expected when the McDonald's All-American was signed. So, Tariq, what has impressed you so far from Gilbert this season?
Well, first and foremost, he's playing as if the injury never happened. You can tell he's not thinking about it. He's playing aggressive. He's playing with speed. And I saw this young man play in high school to now. Same style. He's playing with not a reckless, but he's playing with a reckless attitude where he's not thinking about his injury. He's playing smart. He's probing. He's getting into the lane. And he's an attacking ball guard that makes the job easier for Jalen Adams to get his shot off. And he's the most complete, probably, ball handling guard on this team other than Jalen Adams, so it's good to see him healthy because they're a much deeper team in the backcourt.
Yeah, and a huge bright spot for the future for this staff and for the program, because he is not your typical third-year college player. With all these injuries, as Tariq mentioned, he still only has 13 college basketball games under his belt. So I think when you look at this entire perimeter, the fact that Danny Hurley is another guy that could facilitate for Jalen Adams, another guy that could stroke it when they go against half-court zones, it's going to open up the way and the style that Dan Hurley likes to coach.
Very guard heavy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, we are getting you set for UConn and Cornell at the top of the hour. While Tariq Gilbert came in with the pedigree to get off to a hot start, Eric Cobb's performance so far has caught some people by surprise. We will take a look at how the power forward has improved next. Welcome back. There's Terrence Smith, the grad transfer from Duquesne, is averaging nearly 14 points per game while shooting over 53% from the field so far. With more on tonight's game, let's go back up to Hartford. There's the men calling the game, Gary Apple and Tim Welsh.
So UConn back in the Nutmeg State after splitting a couple of games down at Madison Square Garden. The win over Syracuse and then the loss to Iowa. But let's go back to the Syracuse game because they shot the basketball very well against the Orange, and a big win against a team that for so many years was a big rival. So how did they get it done in that game?
Well, it was magical for UConn that night in the Garden, and their fans really enjoyed the evening so much that they forgot that they had another game the next night. But really, they imposed their will on Syracuse. They used their quickness, and that's how UConn has to play this year. They have to try to speed teams up, play a fast-paced game. And as Dan Hurley told us about 10 days ago, they have to make about 9 threes a game. They made 12. And when you do that against Syracuse, you're going to probably be in good shape. They played pretty good defense. They turned it over at times too much against Syracuse, and their length bothered them a little bit in the zone. But for the most part, they did a good job of speeding Syracuse up, keeping them off balance, and controlling the game.
Well, in many ways, a coming-out party for Eric Cobb at Madison Square Garden. 14.5 points, 10 rebounds. The average in those 2 games. What did he do differently down in New York City?
Well, he's getting more confidence, and if he gets more minutes, he's going to put those numbers up. Dan needs him to play better team defense. He needs to rebound the ball better on the defensive boards. He got up on the offensive glass. He's got good footwork around the basket. He can finish plays. He's very skilled, so they're going to need him in the long haul. Just if he improves his defense, his minutes will go up. His endurance is up. You saw that. He was able to play minutes without tiring against Syracuse.
How does it change for UConn if they get a solid production from their bigs?
Well, they're going to need it. They're going to need balance because teams are going to load up on their guards, and they're not going to make 12 threes every night. They've got to get out and have a balance, not only in playing fast and playing in the half court, but they have to have a balance scoring outside and inside. Cobb will give them that.
All right, so it's UConn going up against Cornell. First time they're meeting in 54 years. Tim and I going to see you coming up just a little bit top of the hour for the tip. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Gary. Let's take a look at the jump that Eric Cobb has made so far this season, presented by Town Fair Tire. He's obviously getting more minutes on the floor, but look at that field goal percentage. He's shooting almost 74% from the field, up from almost 30% last year. So the senior put up a double-double in the Huskies' win over Syracuse, and he followed that up with a career-high 16-point performance against Iowa. Now, we know he worked to lose 40 pounds this summer, but Vin, what has been the biggest difference about his play this season so far?
Well, working with the post guys down low in terms of Dan Hurley's assistant coaches and development back to the basket moves, that was a big emphasis this offseason, this fall, and even in season with the squad. But I think when you look at Cobb, yeah, things like footwork, they're going to improve, and the skill and touch around the rim is going to improve. I think his motor is the biggest difference. I just think he's playing with a different motor. You can tell Dan Hurley's pushing this guy. He's motivated, and he's playing with aggression on both ends of the floor. And you heard Jim Boeheim after that game at his post-game press conference say Cobb looked like man amongst boys at times.
He did, and the motor's directly connected with the fact that he's lost 35, 40 pounds. Obviously, when you're in that kind of shape, you're a different kind of player, and he's been very, very aggressive on the offensive glass, and that's probably been the most impressive thing to me is his second effort on missed shots, going up for the second rebound, preserving possessions, keeping the ball live. I'd like to see him improve a little bit more on the defensive end, as Tim Welsh said, rotating and defensive rebounding. But so far, to average a double-double in the last 2 games is a huge upgrade from last year.
Putting together solid back-to-back performances. We are now just minutes away from tip-off at the Excel Center between UConn and Cornell. First meeting between these schools since 1964. Can the Huskies get back in the win column? We're going to give you our final thoughts after this break. We are counting down to tip-off. There's Jalen Adams, UConn's leading scorer. So far this season, Adams is averaging 18 points per game. But even more impressive is that he's shooting nearly 52% from the field and 40% from deep. So let's take a look at tonight's starting lineup presented by Subaru, and it's the same lineup as the first 4 games of the year. Josh Carlton and Tyler Pauley up front, Jalen Adams, Tariq Gilbert, and Christian Vital in the 3-guard backcourt. So for Vin, Tariq, that is it for us for right now, but we will see you back here at halftime. Enjoy the game, everybody, as the UConn Huskies take on Cornell right here on SNY. Gary Apple and Coach Tim Welsh have the call from downtown Hartford, Connecticut.